Scary telling. I had always been fascinated by the old, abandoned house on the edge of town. It had been vacant for years, the paint peeling off the walls and the windows boarded up. One day, I saw a "For Rent" sign on the front lawn, and I couldn't resist the urge to take a look inside. The landlord was eager to rent out the place and gave me a tour. It was an old, creaky house with a basement that seemed to go on forever. I was immediately drawn to the basement, and the landlord seemed hesitant to let me go down there. He warned me that strange things had happened in the basement and that I should stay away from it. But I couldn't resist. I knew there was something down there that I needed to see. So I rented the house and moved in that same week. At first, everything seemed normal. I settled in, explored the house, and even started to enjoy living there. But after a few weeks, things started to get weird. I would hear strange noises coming from the basement at night, like someone was trying to get out. But whenever I checked, the door was still locked. One night, I was woken up by a loud banging on the front door. I stumbled out of bed and made my way to the door, expecting to see a neighbor in distress. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw a young girl standing outside. She looked scared and desperate, and she kept pounding on the door, begging me to let her in. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know this girl, and it was the middle of the night. But something about her seemed familiar, like I had seen her before. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to let her in. As soon as I unlocked the door, she rushed inside and ran straight to the basement door. She started pounding on it, begging me to let her out. But I couldn't do it. I felt like something was holding me back, like I wasn't supposed to let her go. The girl grew more and more desperate, pounding on the door and crying out for help. But I just stood there, frozen in place. Eventually, she gave up and sat down on the floor, sobbing. For days after that, the girl continued to pound on the door at night. I tried to ignore her, but it was impossible. I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something down there that I needed to see. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went down to the basement with a flashlight, determined to figure out what was going on. As I made my way down the creaky stairs, I heard the girl's voice whispering in my ear, begging me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to see what was down there. And when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw her. The girl from the door, sitting in the corner, staring at me with vacant eyes. But something was wrong. Her skin was pale, her hair matted, and her clothes torn. And then I noticed something even more horrifying. The girl had been dead for years. I stumbled back up the stairs and out of the basement. The memory of the girl's lifeless eyes burned into my brain. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. The girl was not trying to get out of the basement. She was trying to warn me to stay away. I left the house the next day, never to return. But the memory of the girl in the basement haunted me for years, a constant reminder of the horror that lurked in that old house. And as time went on, I heard more and more stories about the house and its dark past. Rumors circulated about a family that had lived there years ago. The parents had been abusive, and their daughter had been kept locked in the basement for years. She had died down there, alone and forgotten. I knew then that the girl who had pounded on my door at night was that same daughter, trying to escape the horrors of her past. But I had been too late to help her, and now her ghost haunted the basement of that old house. Years went by, and I tried to forget about the girl and the house. But the memory lingered, and every time I drove past the old place, I felt a chill run down my spine. One night, I was driving past the house when I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. There was a light on in the basement, a flickering glow that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I knew then that I had to face my fears and confront the ghost of that poor girl. So I parked my car and made my way back to the house. As I approached the door, I heard the girl's voice whispering in my ear once again. But this time, it wasn't begging me to stay away. It was telling me to come closer, to see what lay inside. I took a deep breath and opened the door, making my way down the creaky stairs once again. And there, in the flickering light of the basement, I saw her. The girl was standing in the center of the room, her eyes fixed on me. But this time, she wasn't alone. Other ghostly figures had appeared around her, all of them trapped in that basement for years. As I watched, the ghosts began to dissipate, their spirits finally finding peace. And then, the girl spoke to me one last time. "Thank you," she said. "You helped me find the way out." And with that, she was gone, along with the other ghosts. I knew then that I had finally put the horror of that old house behind me. But I also knew that I would never forget the girl in the basement and the lesson she had taught me about the power of the past to haunt us for years to come. I've been looking for my sister all day long, but I don't remember where I put all the pieces. You see, my sister and I were playing a game of hide and seek when she suddenly vanished. I've been searching for her ever since, but I can't seem to find her anywhere. The strange thing is that I can't remember where I put all the pieces. You're probably wondering what I mean by pieces. Let me explain. A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon a strange artifact while digging through my backyard. It was a small, wooden box with intricate carvings on the lid. When I opened it, I found a collection of what appeared to be puzzle pieces. At first, I thought it was just a fun challenge to put the pieces together. But then I realized that there were more than just puzzle pieces. There were also scraps of paper with strange symbols and words that I couldn't understand. As I began to put the pieces together, I noticed that they formed a map. A map that led to an old, abandoned house on the edge of town. I couldn't resist the urge to explore, so I set off on an adventure to uncover the secrets of the house. When I arrived, I found that the house was in a state of decay. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and the front door was barely hanging on its hinges. But despite its condition, I felt drawn to it. Something inside me was telling me that I needed to go inside. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. It was dark, and the only light was coming from the moon outside. As I walked through the house, I felt a strange energy in the air. It was as if the house was alive and watching me. And that's when I found her. My sister was standing in the corner of the room, surrounded by the puzzle pieces and the scraps of paper. But something was different about her. Her eyes were glazed over, and she was muttering something under her breath. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't seem to hear me. It was as if she was in a trance. And then, she began to speak in a language that I didn't understand. It was a guttural, ancient language that sounded like it came from another world. I tried to grab her and shake her out of it, but she fought back with surprising strength. I realized that I needed to get out of there, so I made a run for the door. But as I reached for the handle, the door wouldn't budge. I was trapped. And then, I noticed that the puzzle pieces had shifted. They were no longer forming a map, but rather a symbol. A symbol that I recognized from the scraps of paper. It was a summoning symbol, used to bring forth entities from another realm. And then I remembered. I had accidentally spilled a drop of my blood on the puzzle pieces while putting them together. That's why my memories were foggy. That's why my sister was under some sort of spell. I realized that I had to complete the summoning ritual in order to reverse the spell and save my sister. So I began to move the puzzle pieces, forming the symbol perfectly. As soon as I finished, the symbol began to glow. The air crackled with energy, and a portal began to form in front of me. I could see dark, twisted shapes moving within the portal, reaching out for me. But I stood my ground, determined to save my sister. And as I stepped through the portal, I found myself in a different world. A world of darkness and horror, where things beyond human comprehension roamed freely. I could hear my sister's voice calling out to me, so I followed it deeper into the darkness. The ground was uneven and slippery, and I stumbled several times, nearly falling into bottomless pits. But I persevered, driven by the love I had for my sister. As I got closer, I could see her standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a massive void. She was surrounded by twisted, black tendrils that seemed to be pulling her closer to the edge. I rushed to her side and grabbed her, pulling her away from the cliff's edge. But as I did, the tendrils lashed out at me, wrapping around my arms and pulling me closer to the edge. I could feel the ground crumbling beneath my feet, and I knew that we were both going to fall. But then, something strange happened. The puzzle pieces that I had brought with me began to glow, and a burst of energy erupted from them, pushing back the tendrils and sealing the portal. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the abandoned house, with my sister lying unconscious at my feet. I scooped her up and carried her out of the house, feeling a sense of relief wash over me as the sunlight hit my face. We went to the hospital, where my sister was treated for her injuries. The doctors couldn't explain what had happened to her, but I knew the truth. We had both been pulled into another realm, a world of darkness and horror, and we had made it out alive. From that day on, I vowed to never let my curiosity get the best of me again. I destroyed the puzzle pieces and burned the summoning symbol, never wanting to experience that horror again. But even now, as I sit here writing this, I can feel the memory of that world creeping up on me, threatening to pull me back in. The last man on earth sat alone in a room. The world had ended, and he was the only survivor. He had searched the ruins of the cities, traveled the empty highways, and explored the desolate countryside, but he had found no one. It was as if the world had simply disappeared. He had spent months in solitude, living off of canned food and scavenged supplies. He had grown used to the silence, to the emptiness that surrounded him. But then, one day, there was a knock at the door. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, the result of months of isolation. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. He walked over to the door, his heart racing with fear and excitement. He opened the door, and there was no one there. He looked around, but there was no sign of life. He closed the door, convinced that he had imagined the whole thing. But then, the knocking started again. He opened the door, and this time, he saw her. A woman, dressed in rags, her hair tangled and wild. She was dirty and emaciated, but her eyes were bright and alive. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He had forgotten how to communicate with another human being, forgotten how to be anything other than alone. But the woman didn't seem to notice. She walked into the room, and he followed her, unsure of what else to do. She sat down on a chair, and he sat across from her. They stared at each other for a few moments, neither one knowing what to say. And then, the woman spoke. "I've been looking for you," she said. He didn't know what to make of her words. He had always assumed that he was the last person on earth, that the world had ended with him as its sole survivor. But the woman seemed to know something that he didn't. "What do you mean?" he asked. "There are others," she said. "We've been traveling together, trying to find any survivors. We saw your smoke signal, and we knew that we had to come find you." He was speechless. He had been so certain that he was alone, that there was no one left in the world. But now, here was this woman, claiming that there were others out there. "What happened to the world?" he asked. "It was a virus," she said. "It spread quickly, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Most people died within a few days. But a few of us were immune. We're the only ones left." He didn't know how to respond. He had spent so much time alone, he had forgotten what it was like to be around other people. But the woman seemed friendly, and he was grateful for the company. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives before the world ended, about the things they missed, and the things they didn't. The woman seemed to understand him in a way that no one else ever had, and he felt a connection with her that he hadn't felt in a long time. As the night wore on, they fell asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. When he woke up, the woman was gone. He searched the room, but there was no sign of her. He went outside, hoping to find her, but she was nowhere to be seen. He never saw her again, but the memory of her stayed with him. She had given him hope, shown him that there was still a chance for humanity, even in the darkest of times. And whenever he heard a knock at the door, he knew that it could be someone else out there, someone who had also survived the end of the world. The knock had brought him fear and uncertainty, but it had also brought him a glimmer of hope. And that was something that he never thought he would feel again. I looked out my window. The stars had gone away. It was the middle of the night, but the darkness seemed thicker, more oppressive than usual. I tried to shake off the unease that settled over me, but I couldn't. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, the darkness surrounding me like a shroud. And then, as if in response to my unease, I heard a sound, a faint scratching at my window. At first, I thought it was just a tree branch, but as the scratching grew louder, I knew that something was wrong. I got out of bed and walked over to the window, peering out into the darkness. And then I saw them. Hundreds of tiny, black creatures, crawling up the side of my house, their movements synchronized and precise. They had no discernible shape or form, and their eyes glowed a sinister red in the darkness. I was paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do. The creatures seemed to sense my presence, and they turned their heads in unison to look at me. And then they started to crawl towards my window. I knew that I had to do something, so I closed the curtains and went to get my phone. I called the police, but when they arrived, the creatures were gone. The officers searched the area, but they found no sign of the creatures or any evidence of their existence. I tried to convince myself that it was just a nightmare, but the scratching at my window continued every night, and the darkness seemed to grow thicker with each passing day. I started to hear whispers in the darkness, voices that spoke in languages I didn't understand. I went to see a therapist, but she couldn't explain what was happening to me. I felt like I was losing my mind, and the only thing that brought me any solace was the thought of leaving this place, of getting as far away from the darkness as possible. But no matter where I went, the darkness followed me. It was like a living thing, a force that refused to be denied. And the creatures were always there, lurking just outside the edge of my vision. I tried to leave town, to escape the darkness, but every time I tried, something would happen to stop me. My car would break down, or I would get lost, or I would find myself trapped in an endless loop of highways and back roads. And then one night, as I was driving down a deserted road, I saw them again. The creatures were there, in the middle of the road, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. I tried to swerve, but it was too late. I crashed my car, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I had been in a coma for weeks, and no one knew what had happened to me. But I knew. I had seen the darkness, and it had taken me. I don't know what these creatures are, or where they come from, but I do know that they're real. And they're coming for us. So if you ever look out your window and see that the stars have gone away, run. Run as fast as you can, or you'll end up like me, trapped in the darkness forever. As a police officer, I've seen a lot of traumatic things, but responding to fatal car accidents was always the most difficult. Nothing can prepare you for the sight of twisted metal, shattered glass, and the lifeless bodies that lie within. But nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed today. I was the first to arrive on the scene of a car accident where a family's car had collided head-on with a truck. The scene was gruesome, and I could tell right away that there was little hope for any survivors. I approached the family car, and as I peered inside, my heart sank. The father was slumped over the steering wheel, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. The mother was sprawled across the back seat, her limbs twisted in impossible positions. And then there was the little boy, no more than 3 years old, strapped into his car seat in the back. His eyes were closed, his skin pale and cold to the touch. I knew that I had to act fast, but as I reached for the child, something caught my eye. His eyelids fluttered, and then they opened wide, revealing bright blue eyes that sparkled with life. And then he giggled at me, a sound that was both eerie and chilling. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just a reflex, that the child was already dead. But then he giggled again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I reached for him, but he squirmed in his car seat, his giggles growing louder and more frequent. I had never experienced anything like this before. I had seen the dead brought back to life in horror movies, but I never imagined that it could happen in real life. I knew that I had to get the child out of the car, but as I tried to peel him out of his car seat, he continued to giggle and squirm. And then, as if on cue, the child's body went limp, his eyes closing once again. I knew that he was gone, but the memory of his giggles stayed with me long after I left the scene. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something had followed me from the accident. I started seeing things, shadows moving in the corners of my vision, strange noises in the middle of the night. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I was overworked and stressed. But then I saw the child again, in my dreams. He was always there, giggling at me, his eyes shining bright. It wasn't until I woke up one night to find the child standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes glowing in the dark, that I knew for sure that something was terribly wrong. I quit the police force the very next day, unable to handle the trauma of what had happened. But the child still follows me, still giggling and playing his sick little games. I've tried everything to get rid of him, from seeing psychiatrists to performing exorcisms. But nothing works. I'm writing this now as a warning to others. Beware the child with the bright blue eyes and the contagious giggle. He may seem innocent, but he's anything but. And if you ever see him, run as fast as you can, or you'll end up like me, haunted by his laughter for the rest of your days.